Earlier this week, I went to the Brimfield Flea Market searching for vintage film cameras. I found a lot of junk, but I also found some treasures. What did I find specifically? Stay tuned and find out. This place is enormous. You walk up and you just see booth after booth on either side of the road, and these things go back into the fields. So you can spend a whole day there, which I did. A lot of the things that you'll find are in boxes just like this, just randomly strewn about. So this can be hard to find something good because a lot of the stuff is just junk. Some of it's for parts only. You don't really, put a lot of faith into this kind of stuff. Some of the stuff is very, very common. These aren't anything out of the ordinary. You can get some really inexpensive stuff if you just want to put some cameras on your shelf, which, I don't know a lot of photographers who don't have some kind of vintage camera on their shelf somewhere. But there are some diamonds in the rough here. I didn't look too much into these as I already have some film SLRs. These were interesting, but when I looked them up, you can get them on eBay a lot cheaper. And that's something you have to consider as well when you're going through these kinds of things. There was just no shortage this time around of all of these kinds of cameras. I love my TLRs, as you can see right there. Some of these were kind of overpriced. I did have my eye on a couple different things, but there wasn't anything I really, really needed. Some of these things I already have on my shelf in various degrees of repair or disrepair, but it was really interesting just to walk around and see what they had. This was something that really appealed to me. This, what was it? It's an Agfa isolette. I already had one of these, actually. It was a refurbished one. It has custom leather, but this was a really nice thing to look at. And if I didn't already have what I had, I might consider this. Then I came upon this booth that had this rolly cord. Now, I love all things rolly, and I don't have a rolly cord, but I do have a rolly flex TLR. So because I do have a Rolleiflex, I wasn't really in the market for another rolly cord. He had $120 on this, which wasn't a bad price considering how good it looked. It was very clean. It appeared to be operating, but I'm sure I could have talked him down a little bit, but it really wasn't anything I wanted to spend that much money on. I wanted to save my money for something more appealing, something that I could use more. This speed graphic was pretty interesting to look at. I don't know much about these cameras, so I don't know if this kit was complete or not, but it was kind of neat to sit there. He did have some Hasselblads in the case, but what really caught my eye were these Leicas. It was an M2 and an M3. The M2 had a lens. He was asking $2,500 for it. The M3 did not have a lens. He was asking an even $1,000 for it. He had some other accessories too. I'm not looking to spend that much money right now, so I didn't go with the Leicas. But now we're getting into a booth that I really spent some time in. This is, they had this right here, this Argus that was really good looking. It just appeared to be immaculate. They told me that it had only had one owner and it probably wasn't ever used. It had a couple of scuffs on the camera itself, but wow, it was really, really pristine. And I was really impressed with how good it looked. And it had all these accessories with it in this beautiful leather case. I checked it out in detail, and all the lenses looked really good. It had all these interesting things in here, some of which I didn't know what they were, and I had to look them up later, but it bore looking into a little bit more. When I was done with that booth, I found this here. There were a lot of Polaroids. I'm not really into Polaroids, but they are really interesting to look at. The cases on this shelf all had Polaroids in them. They had some film hanging around, different accessories. So this caught my eye from the main aisle. Finally, there's this booth that's inside a pre-existing structure, and this is my favorite place to go every time I go to Brimfield. It's just camera after camera after camera, and really vintage stuff. I don't know how much of it is actually usable. Some of it looks really nice. A lot of these are really, really clean cameras, but whether they're actually operational, that I don't know. And because there are so many, when I spoke with the owner, he wasn't sure himself. He didn't know every single camera that he had. And as you can see, he has quite a few, but this is a really fun booth to go through. And I really enjoy spending a few minutes with here. And I like to sort of wind up my day here. We go up one side and down the other. And this is toward the end of my Brimfield excursion. And this doesn't have anything to do with photography, but I thought it was crazy. So I thought I'd take a quick film and include it in here just because it was something really interesting. These are the kinds of things you might see at Brimfield. So what treasures did I get at Brimfield? I got two. So let me start with the easy one first. It's this Minolta 110 Zoom SLR. This isn't one I had on my wish list, but I do like the 110 film format, and this was sitting in one of those boxes of random cameras, and it was covered in grime and dirt, and it looked pretty rough, but I could tell underneath all that, it looked to be pretty solid. So I did a couple tests with it while I was standing there. Everything that is supposed to twist, twists. And I don't know if it works, but I'm going to get a couple of those small button batteries and throw some 110 film in here and play around with it, and maybe I'll make a video about that. So what am I most excited about acquiring this past week at Brimfield? This right here. I acquired these at a booth that had antiques in it. They had furniture. I didn't really expect to see any cameras there, but I was looking at a Polaroid they had on the desk, and the woman behind the counter said, "Oh, do you like classic cameras?" And I said, "Why, yes, I do." So she said, "I've got something for you." So she went behind the counter and pulled these out. The first thing I noticed were these leather cases, and they were in really great shape. I didn't know what exactly was in these just yet, but it didn't look like anything had seen too much use. Everything was pretty good looking. There's a couple scuffs here and there, but I was soon to find out that given how old these things were, this was a pretty good find. First was the camera. Everything said Argus on the outside of it. So I was familiar with Argus cameras, but not intimately so. I opened it up and saw this right here, and I thought, wow, this is in really good shape. The woman that was selling it said that she acquired it from somebody who had it handed down to her and said that it hadn't ever been used. I'm skeptical that it had never been used, but it was in such good shape. If it had been used, it was very, very well cared for. Everything looked really good. Everything was pristine. It looked so clean. So I undid the bottom so I could slide the camera out and inspect it a little bit more. So this here is an Argus C44. It says so right there. While I was looking things up, I learned that this camera was made between 1956 and 1957. Now, Argus had made a lot of other cameras prior to this, but they all had lenses that were attached to the body, and this was the first model they made that had interchangeable lenses. So that was going to be really handy should I ever find additional lenses to go with it. More on that in a minute. So I also wanted to open it up to see if everything was as clean inside as it was on the outside. And sure enough, it is pretty good looking in there. I don't see any scuffs. I don't see any oil. Everything seemed to just look immaculate. It has a hot shoe. You can use the old bulbs that came with it. You can use electronic flash. That was such a satisfying sound. And everything seems to work. Now, when I say works, I mean all the dials turned. I don't know if it works. I'm going to have to run a roll of film through it to find that out. But wait, there's more. There was also this case that came with it. So here's what was in the leather case. To start with, the lens that was on the camera itself was a 50mm f2.8. So that's nice. 50mm is always nice. But it also came with this right here. Also says Argus on the front. Open it up, and this is a, what do we have? So this is a 35mm f4.5. It's a little slow by today's standards, but this is also in such amazing condition. In addition to the 35, it had this lens as well. This was a 100mm f3.5. Again, not super bright compared to today's lenses, but if I'm going to use this outside, it's not really going to be an issue at all. Oh, all this chrome just looks so good. So this little leather case holds this viewfinder right here. This is supposed to, according to the literature, correct for parallax when you put it in the hot shoe, and I think you're supposed to look through it. I honestly couldn't find any documentation on how to use this thing. So putting it on the camera, I didn't see any difference in the viewfinder between not. I couldn't see through this window right here. It appears to be foggy, so either I just don't know how to use it or it's not a functional device. So I'm just going to leave that off for now, but it has its own leather case like everything else, so I'm just going to keep that in its little home here. Now, the flash attachment that came with this right here uses two kinds of bulbs. There are these right here, these flash bulbs, which look like this, and that would pop in there like so. And this pops out. You can pop in this other attachment like that, and then these bulbs go in like so. So there's two different kinds of bulbs. I honestly don't know what the difference between the two of them are, so I might experiment with them if these bulbs are still good. We'll find out at some point. It also came with a few random leather straps, which I suspect are for the lens cases right here. Maybe you can attach them to the side of the lens case or maybe to a belt. I'm not going to be using these, so I'm going to be putting these away in one of the compartments in there. It also came with what I thought was someone's used lipstick, but I pulled it off and it's a little brush. I thought that was pretty cute. So I don't know if this was standard or if someone put this in here at some point, but I think it's a nice little thing to have. And finally were the manuals. Here, the original manual on how to use the camera. It came with some other manuals right here on how to use the lenses. It came with some data sheets for different kinds of film. These all came kind of loose, but I wanted to keep them all together and keep them kind of protected. So what I did was this outer bag right here. This is a comic book bag, standard comic book size, and the board that's in here was also a standard comic book board. So I cut that down for this to fit the size of this manual right here. And to keep the data sheets nice and secure, I cut down a standard print file 120 film holder. So just clipped off the bottom one right there with an X-Acto and a straight edge, and all the data sheets fit nicely in here. When I first opened up the camera to look at the inside, a little piece of paper fell out, and it was this right here. I suspect it was probably a sticker at some point. It says serviced 6/26/68 from the Connecticut Camera Repair in Hartford, Connecticut. I don't know if that's still around, but I thought that was a neat little bit of provenance from whoever owned this camera in the past. So I thought that was a neat little detail. So we're going to hold on to that with everything here. So I'm just going to fold that back up gently. And I'm going to put that in the back here. And finally, to keep everything secure inside this bag, I just use your standard blue painter's tape. Unlike Scotch tape, that's not going to stick to the paper should it accidentally come into contact with the paper. And it's going to allow me to take this off, put this back on. It's nice and easy. Scotch tape has a tendency to stick too much over time, get a little gummy. This won't. So this is going to keep everything nice and secure inside the case. I want to keep everything together. So if you buy old cameras at tag sales or flea markets or the like, they're probably going to be a little dusty, maybe a little dirty. They're going to have someone else's fingerprints all over them. So you might want to clean them a little bit. And there are some safe ways to do that. For this Minolta 110, this was pretty grimy, and there were some stuck-on grimy bits all over this thing. So what I did was I took a Q-tip dipped in isopropyl alcohol. That's going to evaporate. It's going to take off any of the organic matter, any dirt, and that's going to make it nice and clean. This is much nicer than it was. You might not want to use alcohol on more sensitive parts of the cameras. So what I have are these makeup pads, these standard makeup pads. But for the C44, as clean as it was, other people have probably touched it over the years. And there was a little bit of schmutz on here. So I took the makeup pad and just wiped it down. And I did this with the lenses as well. It's going to get any surface grime off of them. And you're gonna be able to see it. I already did this, so I don't think we're going to see anything on here from the leather. But you'll see, oh, maybe a tiny bit. But I'll get in there with the viewfinder. I might not use this on the lens itself. I might use a microfiber cloth for that because that's made for that kind of thing. I don't think these things are too abrasive, but I don't want to mess with the lenses too much. So I'm going to use a standard microfiber cloth for that. But for the exteriors, I did this to the lenses. I did this to this little guy right here. I wiped this down just to, get any fingerprints off it. And it's a little way of making everything just that much cleaner. So that concludes my Brimfield finds, my little Minolta 110 zoom, and this treasure that I got of this Argus C44. I know people are going to ask, so this guy right here, this Minolta, I paid $8 for it. Whether it works or not, I figure for $8 I can take a chance. But for the C44, I don't want to mention what I paid for it, but it was a very fair price. The people that sold it to me, I don't know if they want me to put out there what I wheeled and dealed to get this from them for. So out of respect to them, I'm not going to divulge the price, but it was very fair. And I was very happy with what they charged me. Hopefully they were happy with what I paid. I'm very happy with this purchase. I plan on testing this out at some point in the near future. I can't wait to show you the results. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me talking about going to a flea market and talking about my little acquisition here. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. It really does help with the algorithm.